Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Oh, woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom.
If you could just share with us some reflections on the significance of this moment for you being here at 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, and what you consider to be the continuing significance of our civil rights heritage sites.
Yeah, you see, I consider Birmingham as the ground zero for the black freedom struggle. Mississippi and Birmingham would be the two pillars for me. And what I mean by that is that it manifests most clearly and unequivocally the great tradition of a great people, a black people, who in the face of unbelievable hatred and terror and trauma just keep dishing out these love warriors and freedom fighters and wounded healers. And what you have here at 16th Street with the Baptist Church with the four precious sisters, and I was told 2 brothers were killed that same day.
Yes.
Police and
Vigilantes. Yes, sir.
You see.
4 little girls and 2 little boys.
Exactly. See, a lot of people don't know about those 2 boys. No. But the 4 girls, of course, is like Emmett Till in terms of the concrete, fleshified manifestation of the hatred and terror and trauma coming at us, and yet our fight back.
Well, brother, thank you for spilling over. Thank you for spilling over.
You spill it over,
continuing this legacy.
We are all part of this tradition,
yes,
now, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So thank you for standing with us today. We celebrate you, the legacy that you are representing and continuing, and we will keep you lifted up in our prayers and in our thoughts as we struggle together.
Absolutely. We in it together now.
Because we have a struggle all around the world, whether it be in Gaza, whether it be in Birmingham, Alabama, whether it be in those poor households or on those street corners on a cold day like today. But the power of love, that love supreme, we continue to spill over.
And Alabama is so deeply, deeply blessed to have a brother like you with power and with deep, deep love and commitment and conviction in your heart and soul.
Thank you for being stayed on freedom. God bless you.
Woo! Brother, that was an interview, man.
Yes, sir.
Stayed on freedom.
Stayed on freedom.
Lord have mercy.
Family, wasn't that incredible? The riverfront in Montgomery, Alabama has a deep connection to the history of slavery and of black people in this country. According to the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, by the 1840s, steamboats docked at the riverfront in the city of Montgomery every day, making Montgomery a, quote, principal slave trading center in Alabama. Enslaved people were brought off the boat or off of trains and taken down Commerce Street to be bought and sold. By 1860, Montgomery had at least 167 active slave trader licenses filed, and most of those slave traders had offices along Commerce Street and what continues to go up towards the Capitol and becomes Dexter Avenue, thus causing a frequent parade of enslaved people to and from Commerce Street to the riverfront and other markets in the city. In the interim, enslaved African men, women, and youth were held captive in nearby warehouses until they were bought and sold. The largest was on Commerce Street. Slave markets and pens dotted the area near the river and the train station. The site that Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, one of the sites of the Consortium, currently resides today, was at one time one of the most active slave pens during market sales. By the 1860s, there were 435,000 enslaved black people in the state of Alabama, and the markets and pens where they were held for public auction are short walks from the riverfront to the White House of the Confederacy, what is now the Alabama State Capitol building. For a short time, Montgomery was the capital of the Confederacy. The buying, selling, and brutalizing of our African ancestors continued in Alabama by way of Montgomery through to the end of the Civil War. Yes, family, this is Black History Month. On August 5th, 2023, the world watched as Black co-captain Damian Pickett was violently attacked by a gang of angry whites as he simply attempted to do his job and make a way for the riverboat, the Harriet II, to dock. The whites had docked their own private boat in the location reserved for the Harriet II, and they refused to move. What could have become a tragic and horrifically familiar recording of Black humiliation and victimization dramatically shifted as others got involved and intervened. Young Aaron Rudolph, who had just turned 16 years old that summer and was working a summer job on the riverfront, dove off of the riverboat into the water, swam to the dock, and joined the effort to make sure that history did not repeat itself on the riverfront. This Black History Month episode of the Stayed on Freedom podcast, we go back to the riverfront. We go back to the riverfront and sit down with young 16-year-old Aaron Black Aquaman Rudolph. We sit down and we talk about what happened, why it happened then, what it is that happened there before, and where it is that we need to be going today. So you swam from the boat to the dock. So I got to ask you, brother, where you get your swimming lessons from?
Swimming lessons?
Where you learn to swim?
Free swim. Used to have contests with my cousins, brothers, and sisters. We just go to the Y, swim a little bit, just have fun with it, and just nothing really. I didn't go through any training or anything, but training might have come from football and going to the gym for my stamina, but
right,
swimming is just free thing.
Just came to you. So, because in the history of Black people, racists have said that Black people don't know how to swim.
That's right.
They've even said Black people can't float. We don't have any buoyancy. That's a part of the legend of white supremacy about us. And so when you jumped in that water, all of those racist lies that have been told about us are like, well, there's an exception at least there. Well, brother, this is what we want people to know. We got all of these nicknames, but you are Aaron Rudolph.
Right.
And you are an ordinary, extraordinary young brother.
Yes.
And you are showing us how regular people can become supermen, superwomen in the midst of a moment. Sometimes you have a lot of time to think about it, sometimes you don't. But courage is something that we want to celebrate during this Black History Month. The fact that young people make history. History is always made in the present moment. And I'm sure you weren't thinking about becoming Aquaman when you jumped in that water, but you did. You stepped into history and you helped to shape some history and inspire some folks. So, brother, I just want to thank you. Thank you, Aquaman.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing what you do, and we're going to continue to support you as you do your work and we do our work and we do this work together.
When it wasn't violence, there was a threat of violence. And the threat of violence itself is violence as well. And so they played leadership roles in helping persons navigate the threats that came from just talking back to a police officer. They call it talking back. If you were, as people talk about, children had to be taught how to survive encounters with white people of the time, because there was this unnatural authority the white folks had over African Americans, or like not looking at white folks in the eye, or saying yes sir or no sir, or yes ma'am, no ma'am. The people younger than you, being able to have to endure being called by your first name by a child, a white child, and such and things. So those were the things that people had to learn and to navigate back in those days. while still maintaining your full self-respect and your full dignity. It was necessary to survive in order to live to fight another day, so to speak. Yeah.
Now known as Bloody Tuesday, happened a year before Selma's Bloody Sunday. And while today it is somewhat forgotten, it is critically important to the complete telling of the full story of the civil rights movement.
The leaders were going to be arrested. Reverend Rogers knew that. And he said, when we are arrested, don't turn back. He said, get to downtown, to the courthouse by any means possible, and drink from the water fountain and drink, and use the restrooms that were marked white. And so that was our goal, and we had it in our hearts and in our minds, and we did our singing. And when we left out, we were jubilant, we were marching, we marched out of the church, and they headed down the stairs. We were pretty much over in this area. I was over to the right, the church, my brother and I. All of a sudden, we heard this screaming and this hollering.
I got hit in the side with a cattle prod. I remember that well. What was the purpose of the cattle prod? Is to get that cow moving. And I assume it was to get me moving as well. Well, the only place for me at that point in time was to run back into the church, because I felt that was the only safe place that I could find. Little did I know what would happen in that church. I really didn't know what happened to all the others. My friend, I didn't know, but I know what happened to me.
So they pushed us, told us get back in the church, pushed us back in the church. We went in the church. Next thing I know, the fire hoses were coming through and breaking the glasses. Tear gas was being shot into the church.
When they threw the tear gas in the church, I was in the church. My head got full, real full of tear gas. And when I made it home, my head had blown up like this. But my mother wouldn't take me to the hospital at that time because, we had Klansmen staying from my mama's house to down the road was the Klansmen, and they watched everything we did.
We didn't get news coverage. I didn't say that earlier, but we didn't get news coverage for various reasons. I don't know all the reasons, but I can tell you about Selma in 65. I can tell you about Bull Connor in Birmingham in 63. I could tell you about the bus boycotts in Montgomery. Why don't people know about the Bloody Tuesday event in Tuscaloosa? I want them to know about it. I want it to take its rightful place in history. I want people to know about it. I want my children to know about it. I'm in the fourth quarter of my life. So it is something that I want to pass on. And that's all we can do.
We've come a long way, but we still got some ways to go. Our justice system is not fair enough. Some need to be said, and some got to be done. And show our young people that it's a better life out there. You should want that life. Let's go get that life.
So while they were looking for Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman,
They found bodies.
They found other bodies.
Correct.
That of people who had been murdered, who had been
Exactly.
killed by the forces of white supremacy, by the Klan, by sheriffs.
Exactly.
And what was the reason why they even came to look for Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman? What was the motivation, since there was already these other people missing, apparently? What in your view was the motivation for why this massive effort to come look for them even happened?
Well, the pressure was on the Justice Department and on Johnson at that point, and on Hoover, who is no fan of black people, right? But the pressure, again, the local pressure coming from all these organizations, black and white, was putting a lot of pressure on. And then Johnson put a lot of pressure on Hoover, because what the authorities at the time were saying, well, these guys, nothing happened to them. This is just a setup. to bring a ticket.
They went back up to Chicago.
Yeah, they went back to Chicago somewhere, whatever. So the idea was just to push this off as being insignificant, but the pressure was so massive. I said, guys, you don't want to come here and drive the main roads. You need to know where the back roads are. So me and some other folk locally that knew the roads taught them those things, how to do that. That was for their own protection and for our protection. So this notion of these kids coming down, I think they meant well, and many of them did good things, but they had no idea what they were getting in. Right. So part of that training that they did in Ohio was to prepare them. And during the time they were being prepared, and that's when they got the word that workers were missing. And I think Bob and others said at that time, and black people knew at that time, when you go missing in Mississippi, at that time, you dead. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, the woman that we know now that people didn't know then, would come out onto the boardwalk and as a way to lift our spirit, would sing. And Miss Hamer just had this wonderful booming voice. And so, song was so much a part of the freedom movement anyway, right? So we sang all the time. But it was just extra bonus to have her come to the boardwalk and actually sing.
When we started this State on Freedom podcast, she was absolutely essential. I mean, I had her voice ringing in my mind when I even thought about what we should call it. And so when people listen to this podcast at the beginning and the end and they hear that voice singing, woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom, that's Fannie Lou Hamer. As we were driving over from Alabama to Mississippi, we talked about how in a negative way, people oftentimes look at Alabama and Mississippi and they see us, and sometimes in Alabama, we're always at the bottom of all of these different lists of quality of life. We're at numbers 49 and 50. And sometimes, so Alabama doesn't always have to be last. They say, well, we say, thank God for Mississippi, because Mississippi sometimes is 50 to our 49th. But as we close, I say, thank God for Mississippi in a completely different way. We thank God for Mississippi because without Mississippi, there would be no freedom movement in Alabama. Without Alabama, there would be no freedom movement in Mississippi. And really, it's the whole Southern Black Belt. It's looking at Louisiana, looking at Mississippi, looking at Alabama, looking at Georgia, looking at South Carolina. But we are a family of communities that have been engaged in a continuing struggle. The struggle continues because those lists are unacceptable in terms of continuing conditions in this modern moment. But we know that we have deep roots and we have foundation in our freedom soil.
Oh, shit.
And we're gonna stay on freedom. Do y'all remember that song from Beyonce back in 2016, Formation? It was the lead single on her Lemonade album. In the beginning of that song, she says, Daddy from Alabama, Mama Louisiana. Well, in this episode of the Stayed on Freedom podcast, we are going back to Beyonce Knowles' daddy's hometown, Gadsden, Alabama. In Gadsden, Alabama, we discovered something phenomenal. There is a 100-plus-year-old graveyard, a cemetery, Southern Hills Cemetery that had largely been forgotten. It was overgrown and so much of the history had been lost. But thanks to the work of the Grace Heritage Organization, the land was cleared. Graves have been rediscovered and charted and documented. And what they have found is not only is Beyonce Knowles' family members buried there, but there are also business people, soldiers, veterans from the Civil War, leaders, and even a victim of lynching.
If you want to continue to say, I am my ancestors' wildest dream, be that. If you want to consider, yourself saying that, my ancestors, I'm walking in the foot or standing on the shoulders of my ancestors, then do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you can say that, but if there is no action behind that, then what's the purpose of that?
That's right.
Call a thing a thing.
Call a thing a thing.
Because I have cataloged every single grave for every single person that is in this graveyard. We have approximately 840 graves that we have cataloged to date, and probably that many more that we have unfound. This is an 8-acre cemetery, and we've cleared approximately 3.5 acres. Some days it's heartbreaking to see some of the things that have happened to this cemetery, to find out and gain knowledge of the people that are buried here and the work that they did in the community. We have some egregious acts that have happened to some of the people that are buried here as it relates to their civil rights. Dating back to 1905, Bunk Richardson was falsely accused of raping a white woman. And Brian Stevenson and his lynching memorial in Montgomery actually have one of our burials here celebrated in that museum. I worked closely with him to get the history and everything of Bunk Richardson, because he was taken from a city jail, marched through town to the train trellis, the L&N Railroad train trellis in the middle of town, and hung. Governor Jelks at that time had told people that he had given them instruction not to touch him because he was not found guilty at all. They just kept him in jail for his own safety. They had found the two that were responsible for that, but they wanted him dead as well. So they took him from the jail in the middle of the night. A large group of white people. Yes, pretty much. They knocked the jailer out, marched him through town, and hung him. Annie Albrook, the headstone says Annie Albrook, and it has DJ 32 and nothing else. No date of birth, no date of death, nothing. So I went to Savannah, and we did a tour of one of the historic cemeteries there. And I took the picture and I asked one of the guides, do you have some graves that look like this? And she was like, sure, have a whole section. Took me to that section and I was like, well, I don't understand the DJ 32. She said, well, I'll tell you. And this is something that you may not, want to hear. But that DJ is the person that owned her. And the 32 is the 32 bales of cotton she baled the day she died.
Oh.
It's called a name and production number.
I don't have any words.
So the country has had the opportunity to hear a lot about your political analysis, about what's happening in these national elections. But for a moment, we want to hear more about just who is Latasha Brown, your origin story. If you were one of those superheroes and we were given the origin story, tell us about Selma. Tell us about the journey that has led you to this point.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me, and before I be a slave,
Yes.
I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. When I think about my origin story, that's my origin story. I'm the first to tell you, do I believe that we're going to be liberated through voting? Absolutely not. That's not what I believe. What I do believe, though, is voting is a powerful harm reduction strategy. That sometimes you need some grace and space.
Harm reduction
strategy to reduce the harm happening to our communities. That at the end of the day, having policies that are in place that hold the police accountable, that's a harm reduction strategy. Having pieces in place that make sure that our folks have access to housing and quality and affordable housing, that's a harm reduction strategy for us. We've become lazy in thinking. And I don't mean in terms of work. I mean in terms of our analysis, our discernment, that at the end of the day, don't tell me nothing about nobody no stimulus check. Because if it's a stimulus check, do you know the stimulus check was what? $800? Do you know that? Do you know that there were black folks that were sold in this country for $800?
Right.
Don't do that. Right. So at the end of the day, don't be bought out for $800. So
don't get caught up in even arguing with those folks.
Don't.
I don't argue with anybody that Harriet Tubman would have shot.
Well, I don't argue with them, but let me say, I don't dismiss them either.
This morning with my mind